Karen's manicured fingers traced the edge of the infinity pool as she surveyed what she now considered her domain. "This will be perfect for the HOA summer gala," she declared, her voice dripping with entitlement. Behind her, 24 neighbors nodded in agreement, their eyes gleaming with the promise of an exclusive party. But what Karen didn't know was that the homeowner, Daniel, stood hidden in the shadows of his own house, watching her claim his sanctuary, and he was about to remind everyone exactly whose property they were standing on. The pool's gentle hum would soon turn into Karen's worst nightmare, and the splash that followed would echo through the entire neighborhood for years to come. Daniel Morrison had built his dream home with his own hands. Literally, every beam, every tile, every carefully placed stone around the infinity pool that overlooked the valley below had been a labor of love. During the 3 years following his divorce, the pool wasn't just a luxury, it was his sanctuary, his therapy, his proof that he could rebuild his life from nothing, which made finding 24 strangers lounging around it on a Tuesday afternoon feel like a violation of the deepest kind. "Excuse me," Daniel called out as he approached the gathering, his work boots crunching on the travertine he'd laid himself. "I think there's been some mistake." The conversations died instantly. 24 pairs of eyes turned toward him, ranging from surprised to annoyed to outright hostile. At the center of it all stood Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, whose perfectly coiffed blonde hair seemed to defy both gravity and humidity. She held a clipboard like a weapon and wore the expression of someone who'd never been told no in her entire privileged life. "No mistake at all," Karen said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We're conducting the final walkthrough for next month's HOA summer gala venue. This is community business." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Community business. This is my backyard." "Your backyard? That happens to be the only suitable location for our annual fundraiser," Karen replied, not missing a beat. "The community center's pool is being renovated. The country club is booked solid, and frankly, this is the most impressive private pool in the development." She gestured around with the practiced flair of a real estate agent. "It's perfect for our needs." "Perfect for your needs." Daniel's voice climbed an octave. "Did it occur to you to ask me first?" Karen's laugh was crystalline and condescending. "Ask, honey, this is about community spirit. Everyone contributes to the neighborhood's well-being. It's not like we're asking you to pay for anything. Just my privacy, my peace, and my property rights." Daniel shot back. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some of the neighbors shuffled uncomfortably, but others, Karen's inner circle, straightened their spines in solidarity. Daniel recognized most of these faces from mandatory HOA meetings, where Karen ruled with parliamentary procedure and passive intimidation. "Look," said Tom Bradley, Karen's lieutenant and the HOA treasurer, stepping forward with his hands raised in mock peace. "We're talking about one evening. 4 hours. Maximum. You'll barely notice we're here." "I'll barely notice. 24 people in my backyard." 50. Karen corrected matter-of-fact. 50 people. "We're expecting quite the turnout this year." Daniel felt his blood pressure spike. 50 people. "In my pool area, around your pool area," Karen clarified with surgical precision. "We're not talking about swimming. This is a sophisticated, cocktail event. Catered a daughters, a string quartet, tasteful lighting, absolutely not." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Karen's perfectly applied smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. But Daniel caught the flash of something dangerous in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice dropping to a register that somehow managed to sound both sweet and threatening. "I said no. Find another venue." "Mr. Morrison," Karen's voice took on the tone of a kindergarten teacher addressing a particularly slow child, "I don't think you understand the situation here. The invitations have already been sent. The caterer has been booked. The quartet has been paid their deposit. This event is happening." "Not here, it isn't." Karen's mask slipped completely. "Are you seriously going to be the one person who ruins this for everyone? The one selfish neighbor who puts his own convenience above the community's needs?" Daniel looked around at the assembled crowd. Some faces showed embarrassment, others resignation, but too many displayed the entitled expectation that his space should be available for their pleasure simply because they wanted it. "Let me get this straight," Daniel said slowly. "You've planned an entire event around using my property without asking my permission, spent money on deposits and invitations, and now you're trying to guilt me into compliance." "It's one evening," Tom Bradley repeated. "What's the big deal?" "The big deal is that this is my home, my sanctuary. The place I come to escape from." Daniel gestured broadly at the crowd. "This exact kind of presumption. Sanctuary." Karen's voice dripped with sarcasm. "It's a swimming pool, not a temple. It's my swimming pool." "In our community," Karen fired back, "and community means compromise. It means thinking beyond yourself. Community means respecting boundaries," Daniel countered. "It means asking permission before you take what isn't yours." The argument was drawing attention from other neighbors. Daniel could see faces appearing at windows and people emerging from houses along the ridge. Nothing traveled faster in a planned community than conflict, and Karen clearly thrived on having an audience for her power plays. "You know what?" Karen said, pulling out her phone. "Let me just check something." She scrolled through her device. With theatrical efficiency, "Oh, would you look at that? According to the CC&RS stats, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions for those who don't read their homeowner documentation, any private amenity that could serve community purposes can be designated for neighborhood use during special circumstances." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "That's not what that clause means, isn't it?" Karen's smile was razor-sharp now. Section 4.7.3. Private amenities of significant community value may be utilized for neighborhood benefit during designated community events, subject to reasonable compensation and HOA board approval, subject to homeowner consent, Daniel said through gritted teeth. "Funny thing about that," Karen said, her voice now carrying the confidence of someone who'd done her homework. "The consent clause was amended at last year's annual meeting. You know, the one where only 12 people showed up to vote. The amendment passed 7-5. Homeowner consent is no longer required, just HOA board approval and reasonable compensation." Daniel's mind raced. He had missed that meeting. He'd been dealing with a work crisis that had kept him traveling for 2 weeks straight. "How much compensation are we talking about?" he asked, hoping to buy time to think. "Well," Karen consulted her clipboard, "after you factor in the professional cleaning service, pool maintenance adjustment, and administrative fees, we're looking at about $200. $200 to rent out my entire backyard for your party. $200 in community value added to your property through increased neighborhood prestige," Karen corrected. "This event will put our development on the social map. Property values will rise across the board." Daniel looked around at the faces surrounding him. These people had already decided. They'd made their plans, spent their money, and convinced themselves that his property was theirs to use. The vote they'd taken in his absence had been their insurance policy against exactly this kind of objection. "What if I refuse?" Karen's smile widened. "Well, that would be a violation of the CC&Rs. The HOA would have to pursue enforcement action. Fines, legal fees, possible liens on the property. It could get quite expensive. Much more expensive than simply being a good neighbor for..." One evening, the threat hung in the air like smog. Daniel had heard stories about HOA enforcement actions that had bankrupted homeowners over trivial violations. Karen clearly had the backing of her board and the legal framework to make his life miserable if he didn't comply. "One evening," he said finally. "One evening," Karen confirmed, her victory smile dazzling in the afternoon sun. "When Saturday, August 12th, 7 to 11 p.m., Daniel nodded slowly. "Fine, but I want that $200 paid in advance. And I want a written agreement about cleanup, damage liability, and noise restrictions." "Of course," Karen said smoothly. "Tom will handle the paperwork. We'll have everything formalized by the end of the week." As the crowd began to disperse, chattering excitedly about the upcoming event, Daniel stood alone beside his pool. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. In 3 weeks, that tranquil surface would be disturbed by caterers, decorators, and dozens of neighbors who saw his private space as their public amenity. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Marcus Chen had been his attorney during the divorce and had made it clear that Daniel could call any time if he needed legal advice. "Marcus, it's Daniel Morrison. I need to ask you about HOA enforcement and property rights. And maybe about swimming pool maintenance systems." By the time Karen's car pulled out of his driveway, Daniel was already formulating a plan. She'd used the legal system to force his compliance, leveraging community pressure and financial threats to get. Part 2. The PREPARETO. On the next morning, Daniel stood in his kitchen with Marcus Chen's legal advice echoing in his head. "They can force access to your property, but they can't force you to maintain amenities beyond basic safety standards." The distinction was crucial, and it had given Daniel the framework for what he was about to do. He pulled up the contact information for Aquatech Pool Systems, the company that had installed his Infinity Pool's complex filtration and circulation system. When he'd built the house, he'd spared no expense on the engineering: multiple pumps, automated chemical balancing, a state-of-the-art heating system, and most importantly, a sophisticated drainage system that could empty the entire 25,000-gallon pool in under 4 hours. Aquatech. This is Jake speaking. "Jake, it's Daniel Morrison on Ridgeview Drive. You installed my Infinity system 3 years ago." "Oh hey, Mr. Morrison. How's that beauty treating you?" "Actually, that's why I'm calling. One needs some maintenance work done, and I want to schedule it for August 12th. There was a pause. "August 12th, that's a Saturday. We usually don't do weekend calls unless it's an emergency." "I'll pay double your emergency rate," Daniel said. "And I need the work done in the evening. 7 p.m. start time." Jake's tone shifted. Too interested. "What kind of maintenance are we talking about?" "Full system flush and drain. I want to test the emergency drainage protocols. Check all the pumps. Inspect the filtration system, basically everything that would require the pool to be completely empty. Mr. Morrison, that's a pretty extensive job. Takes about 6 hours start to finish if we're being thorough. You sure you want to drain the whole thing? Positive? How long to refill once you're done with your system? 12 to 14 hours, depending on water pressure, plus another day for the chemicals to balance properly before it's swimmable again. Perfect. Daniel smiled for the first time since yesterday's invasion. Book it. Saturday, August 12th, 7 p.m. sharp. After hanging up, Daniel spent the rest of the morning researching HOA law and his own CC&Rs. Karen had been clever, but she'd also been sloppy. The amendment she'd referenced did allow the HOA to designate private amenities for community use, but it also contained specific language about reasonable notice and property condition standards. Daniel had received no formal notice Karen's ambush yesterday, and nowhere in the CC&Rs did it state that he was required to maintain his pool in party-ready condition for HOA events. By afternoon, he was driving to the office supply store to make copies of every relevant document. If Karen wanted to play legal games, he'd be ready with his own paperwork. His phone buzzed as he was leaving the store. Tom Bradley's name appeared on the screen. Daniel, Tom Bradley here. Just calling to follow up on the paperwork for the gala. What about it? Well, Karen asked me to get your signature on the venue agreement and arrange payment for the compensation. I'm listening. Could you swing by my office this afternoon? It'll just take a few minutes. Daniel checked his watch. I'll be there at 4. Tom Bradley's home office was exactly what Daniel had expected: mahogany furniture, leather books that had probably never been opened, and diplomas from mediocre universities arranged to create maximum impression. Tom gestured to a chair across from his oversized desk. Appreciate you coming by, Daniel. I know yesterday got a little heated, but we're all neighbors here. We need to stick together. Daniel said nothing, waiting for Tom to produce the paperwork. Here's the venue agreement, Tom said, sliding a thick document across the desk. Pretty standard stuff. Usage terms, liability waivers, cleanup protocols. Daniel read carefully. The agreement was thorough, specifying setup times, guest limits, noise restrictions, and damage responsibilities. It also contained a clause that made Daniel's pulse quicken. Venue amenities shall be maintained in full operational condition throughout the event period. This clause about operational condition, Daniel said, pointing to the relevant paragraph. What exactly does that mean? Tom shrugged. Just that everything should be working normally. Pool pumps running, lights functioning, that sort of thing. And if something breaks down during routine maintenance, well, obviously we'd expect you to get it fixed before the event. The agreement gives you 2 weeks' notice for any necessary repairs. Daniel nodded and kept reading. The compensation section was even more insulting than Karen had indicated: $200 total, with $50 deducted for administrative processing fees. $150. Daniel asked, plus the value of increased neighborhood prestige. Tom said quickly, property values across the development should see a boost from this kind of high-profile community event. High-profile? Oh yes. Karen's invited the mayor, several city council members, the president of the Chamber of Commerce. This could really put our neighborhood on the map. Daniel signed the agreement with a flourish. When do I get paid? Check will be cut tomorrow. Should have it by Friday. As Daniel stood to leave, Tom's expression grew serious. Look, Daniel, I hope you know this isn't personal. Karen can be intense, but her heart's in the right place. She really does want what's best for the community. I'm sure she does, Daniel replied. I'm sure we all do. That evening, Daniel sat on his back patio with a beer, watching the sun set over his pool. The water was crystal clear, perfectly heated, chemically balanced to perfection. In 9 days, it would be the centerpiece of Karen's social triumph, or it would be an empty concrete basin surrounded by very disappointed party guests. His phone rang. Marcus Chen. Daniel, I've been thinking about our conversation this morning. You're absolutely sure you want to go through with this? They forced my hand, Marcus. I didn't ask for this fight. I understand that, but HOA retaliation can get ugly. Are you prepared for the long-term consequences? Daniel looked out at his sanctuary, the place he'd built with his own hands, the refuge he'd created after his world fell apart. They've already told me my privacy doesn't matter, my consent isn't required, and my property is theirs to use whenever they vote to take it. What exactly am I supposed to be afraid of losing? Fair point. Just make sure you document everything. Every conversation, every piece of paperwork, every maintenance record. If this goes to court, you'll want a paper trail that shows you acted within your rights. Already on it. Good. And Daniel, make sure your pool maintenance is genuinely legitimate. If they can prove you sabotaged their event out of spite, you'll lose any legal protection you might have. The maintenance is completely legitimate. I haven't had a full system inspection since installation. It's actually overdue. After Marcus hung up, Daniel spent the evening creating a detailed timeline. August 12th, Aquatech arrives at 7 p.m. to begin routine maintenance requiring full pool drainage. Karen's party, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pool, empty 7:30 p.m. through at least 2 a.m. the following morning. The timing was perfect. Over the next week, Daniel watched Karen's preparations escalate. A parade of vendors trooped through the neighborhood caterer, conducting site visits, florists measuring spaces for arrangements, lighting technicians stringing elegant fixtures around his pool area. Each visit required Karen to unlock his backyard gate with the key he'd been forced to provide per the venue agreement. She was in her element, directing traffic with military precision and treating his property like her personal event space. Neighbors stopped by regularly to check on progress, chattering excitedly about the upcoming social highlight of their summer. On Friday afternoon, Tom Bradley delivered the compensation check personally. $150 for the use of Daniel's entire backyard and pool area for 4 hours. Looking forward to tomorrow night, Tom said, surveying the setup preparation. Karen's really outdone herself this time. I'm sure it'll be memorable, Daniel replied. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather, sunny.com, and warm. Ideal conditions for an outdoor party. Daniel spent the day doing routine yard work, maintaining the facade of cooperation while vendors completed their setup around him. The transformation was impressive. His rustic travertine patio had been covered with elegant outdoor carpeting. Cocktail tables with crisp white linens dotted the space. String lights created a magical canopy over the pool area. A small stage for the quartet had been erected near the infinity edge, positioned to take advantage of the stunning valley view that looked exactly like the kind of sophisticated gathering that would impress mayors and city council members, the kind of event that would establish Karen as the neighborhood's premier social coordinator and cement her reputation as someone who could make things happen. At 5 p.m., Daniel retreated to his house and called Aquatech to confirm the evening's schedule. All set for 7 o'clock, Mr. Morrison. Jake and his crew will be there right on time. Perfect, and you have my gate code. Got it, we'll come in through the side entrance so we don't disturb your. Wait, what's all this set up in your backyard? Daniel looked out his kitchen window at the elegant party preparations. Neighborhood event. They're using the space tonight. There was a long pause. You do realize we're going to drain your pool, right? Starting at 7 p.m. I realize that. Another pause, and there's a party happening at the same time. That's correct, Mr. Morrison. Are you sure about the timing? On this, Daniel watched Karen's catering crew arrive and begin setting up their stations around his empty pool. Part 3. The RSXO and ING. Daniel opened his front door before Jake from Aquatech could even knock. Through the side gate, the sound of elegant conversation and clinking glasses drifted across the evening air. String quartet music provided a sophisticated backdrop to what was shaping up to be the neighborhood's social event of the year. Evening, Mr. Morrison, Jake said, hefting a toolbox ready for that system maintenance. More than ready. You remember the drill, full drain, complete inspection, thorough cleaning. Jake glanced toward the gate where well-dressed guests were still arriving. You sure about the timing? Sounds like quite the party going on back there. The party is exactly why the timing matters, Daniel said. I need to know my system can handle emergency situations. What if there was a medical emergency during a large gathering and we needed to drain immediately? Jake shrugged. Your pool, your call. Where do you want us to set up? Daniel led the three-man crew around to the side gate. As they entered the backyard, the full scope of Karen's transformation became apparent. 50 elegantly dressed guests mingled around the illuminated pool area, champagne flutes in hand, while uniformed servers circulated with silver trays of hors d'oeuvres. The mayor was there, easily recognizable from campaign photos, deep in conversation with Karen, near the infinity edge. City council members clustered around the bar setup, and the Chamber of Commerce president was taking selfies with the stunning valley view. Backdrop. It was exactly the kind of high-profile gathering that would cement Karen's reputation and establish her as the neighborhood's social powerhouse. Jake surveyed the scene and whistled low. This is one fancy shit. You sure you want us working during all this? Routine maintenance waits for no one, Daniel said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Safety first, right? Karen spotted them immediately. Her face went through a fascinating sequence of expressions: confusion, recognition, and dawning horror before settling on barely controlled fury. She excused herself from the mayor and glided over with the predatory grace of a shark sensing blood. Daniel, she said through a smile so forced it looked painful. What exactly is going on? Here, scheduled pool maintenance, Daniel replied cheerfully. These gentlemen are from Aquatech. They installed the system, and it's time for the annual comprehensive inspection. Annual inspection? Karen's voice climbed an octave despite her efforts to maintain composure. Tonight. The best time to test emergency systems is during high scenarios, Daniel explained, gesturing toward the party. If something goes wrong with this many people around the pool area, I need to know my drainage protocols work properly. Jake, oblivious to the undercurrents of the conversation, was already connecting hoses and setting up equipment. Don't mind us, folks. We'll try to keep the noise down, but this pump system's pretty loud when it gets going. Loud. Karen's composure cracked visibly. Oh yeah, Jake said, firing up the first circulation pump. The machine roared to life with a sound like a jet engine. These high-capacity systems aren't built for quiet operation. Safety over silence, you know. Conversations around the pool began to falter as guests turned toward the mechanical noise. The string quartet gamely attempted to play over the sound, but chamber music was no match for industrial-grade pool equipment. Daniel, Karen hissed, abandoning all pretense of social grace. You cannot do this. Not tonight. Do what? Maintain my pool equipment. I'm pretty sure the venue agreement specified that all amenities should be kept in proper working order. Working order doesn't mean tearing everything apart during our event. Actually, Daniel pulled out his copy of the signed agreement. It says amenities should be maintained in full operational condition throughout the event period. I'm making sure they stay that way. The mayor approached, his political smile wavering as another pump kicked in, doubling the noise level. Everything all right over here? Just a small technical issue, Karen said quickly. Nothing that can't wait until no issue at all, Daniel interrupted. Routine maintenance to ensure guest safety. Can't be too careful with this many people around deep water. The mayor nodded approvingly. Safety first. Wise thinking. As he walked away, Karen grabbed Daniel's arm with fingers like steel claws. Stop this right now. Stop what? Ensuring my pool meets safety standards for your event. Jake called out from the equipment area. Mr. Morrison, we're ready to start the drain sequence. Fair warning, once we open the main valve, it's pretty dramatic. Big whoosh of water movement. Proceed. Daniel called back. Drain. Karen's voice was barely a whisper. You're draining the pool. Complete system flush. Only way to properly inspect the circulation infrastructure. But the pool is the centerpiece of the entire event. The whole aesthetic depends on Jake opened the main drainage valve. 20-5,000 gallons of perfectly heated, chemically balanced water began rushing toward the valley below with the sound of Niagara Falls. The infinity edge, which had been showcasing a mirror-perfect reflection of the evening sky, transformed into a cascading waterfall as the water level dropped rapidly. The effect on the party was immediate and catastrophic. Conversations stopped mid. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. The string quartet gave up entirely, their delicate music obliterated by the roar of draining water. Every single guest turned to stare at the rapidly emptying pool, watching Karen's carefully orchestrated ambience disappear down the drain. Oh my God, someone whispered. Is it supposed to do that? Asked another voice. The mayor approached again, his political instincts clearly alerting him to developing disaster. Ms. Whitmore, perhaps you could explain what's happening. Karen's face had gone through several color changes, settling on a shade of red that clashed violently with her dress. There's been a miscommunication. About the timing of routine maintenance. Miscommunication? Daniel stepped forward helpfully. I don't think so. We agreed that all systems would be properly maintained during the event period. This is proper maintenance, but you're destroying the entire atmosphere. I'm ensuring safety compliance. What if someone fell in? What if there was a medical emergency requiring pool access? What if the filtration system failed with all these people around potentially contaminated water? Each question hit like a physical blow. Karen's carefully constructed social triumph was dissolving as quickly as the water rushing from her centerpiece attraction. How long does this take? The mayor asked, watching the water level drop below the infinity edge completely. About 4 hours for complete drainage and system inspection, Jake answered cheerfully. Then 12 to 14 hours to refill, plus another day for chemical rebalancing. The mayor's expression shifted from polite interest to political calculation. So the pool will be empty for the remainder of the evening. Empty as a bone, Jake confirmed. But hey, you'll have a great view of the basin architecture. Beautiful stonework down there. And it was true. As the water level dropped, the pool's elegant construction became visible, carefully fitted stone. Multiple drain systems, sophisticated lighting that now illuminated an empty concrete basin instead of shimmering water. The visual effect was jarring. What had been an elegant infinity pool showcasing Karen's event planning prowess was now a gaping hole in the ground. Surrounded by cocktail tables and disappointed guests, Karen, Tom Bradley appeared at her elbow, his face pale. The photographers are asking questions. The Chamber of Commerce president wants to know if we should reschedule. And someone from the city council just asked if this is some kind of publicity stunt. Karen's composure finally shattered completely. This is sabotage, she shrieked, her voice carrying across the entire gathering. He's sabotaging my event. Every conversation stopped. 50 guests turned to stare at the president having a public meltdown beside an empty swimming pool while industrial pumps roared in the background. Sabotage. Daniel's voice was calm, reasonable, carrying clearly in the sudden silence. I'm maintaining my property to ensure guest safety. Isn't that exactly what a responsible homeowner should do? You planned this. You deliberately scheduled this to ruin everything. I scheduled routine maintenance for my pool equipment. The timing is purely coincidental. Coincidental? Karen's voice cracked. You expect people to believe it's coincidental that you're draining your pool during our biggest event of the year. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed the screen to nearby guests. I called Aquatech on July 20th to schedule this maintenance. That's 3 weeks ago, long before I received any formal notice about tonight's event. But you knew. We were planning this. I knew you'd made assumptions about using my property without my consent. I didn't receive official notice until Tom delivered the paperwork on August 4th, 8 days after. I'd already scheduled this maintenance. The mayor stepped forward, his political radar now fully engaged. Ms. Whitmore, are you saying you planned a community event around private property without the owner's advance knowledge? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Around her, guests began reaching for phones, some checking the time, others calling for rides. The elegant cocktail party was dissolving as rapidly as the pool had drained. This is a community amenity, Karen finally managed. The HOA has the right to designate private amenities for community use.